I am pleased to join you for this important conversation on post-election electoral law reform agenda. This conference has assembled practitioners who will add immense value as we think through electoral law reform for the 2022-2027 cycle. I thank the Electoral Law and Governance Institute for Africa, ELGE, who have collaborated with the Parliamentary Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs and the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission to convene this important workshop. I also take note of the participation of other electoral and governance institutions like the State Law Office, the Kenya Law Reforms Commission, Office of the Registrar of Political Parties, Commission of Administrative Justice, among others. The multi-sectoral nature of this workshop is also evident in the presence of vital civil society organizations and religious organizations. I also recognize the development partners, the USAID and the United Kingdom Foreign Commonwealth Development Office, FCDO, for supporting this important consultation. Our rich political history is characterized by the struggle to realize the rule of law, social and economic transformation, and sustainability. Our decades of effort culminated in the Constitution of Kenya 2010, which embodies the spirit and aspirations of Kenyans. As we reflect on the 2022 general elections, participants might recall that election management was a central theme in the struggle for constitutional reform. Indeed, the disputed elections in 2007 defined the constitutional moment that gave the final impetus to the enactment of the Constitution. Allow me to lay the groundwork for some ideas, some which have already been talked about, I consider important for deliberation. At the core of our Constitution are the national values and principles of governance, which both describe and prescribe what Kenya should be and how it should be governed. Patriotism, national unity, sharing and devolution of power, rule of law, democracy, and participation of the people anchor Article 10. They define the Kenyan character. A free and fair electoral process embodies the constitutional sovereignty of the Kenyan people and is the cross-cutting feature that facilitates the ultimate accountability to the people. In this sense, peaceful transition of power and constitutionalism is guaranteed and protected. The 2010 Constitution lays significant importance to both an elaborate state governance structure and an adequately regulated electoral framework as an important element of that governance structure. Further, the Constitution has two broad pillars: nation building and state establishment. Elections and peaceful transition of political power and the quintessential props for these two pillars that contribute to public participation and accountability, thus opening the gates to legitimacy of the state. Whereas the competitive electoral democracies are by their nature divisive, it is important that the aftershocks yield public confidence that in turn services the objectives of nation building.
Mr. Wachira Maina, who was giving us some general electoral remarks, and in those remarks they made certain comments that were very important for this, how the workshop is part of the process of undertaking reforms in our electoral processes. We also had remarks from the Law Society of Kenya, one of the commissioners of the Commission for Administrative Justice. And in all were that the question of electoral integrity is something that we
MP Gatanga constituency, this opportunity on behalf of the thank you and in particular our invitation and indeed honor. As I mentioned yesterday, Excellencies, who are here with us. As I mentioned yesterday,
had a reasonable formula for actualization of the two-thirds gender principle. Unfortunately, some recommendations have notoriously been at the expense of preserving the structure and composition of the legislature as prescribed by the Constitution. So, as we move forward, and Mheshimiwa Kalonzo and others are at the center of this, we intend to take another crack at this again. Through progressive dialogue such as today, we should find reasonable solutions to this constitutional challenge. Fifth, the nagging issue of capacity for devolved units to facilitate constructive accountability. Devolution remains one of the transformative elements of our Constitution. In the early days of devolution, the separation of the county executives from the county assembly seemed a novel idea until it began to show misalignment of power and interests. This led to the current controversies, only resolved through impeachment. If we are thinking constitutional realignment, it is important to consider options which may facilitate constructive institutional checks within counties. Then there's the issue of election management. Parliament has made significant progress establishing the legislative framework contemplated by the 2010 Constitution and the establishment of relevant institutions to fulfill the constitutional objects on elections. Over the last 3 elections, the electoral bodies built capacity and operational efficiency in management of elections. On future election cycles, the conversation beginning today should address the following issues, and you have touched on them, but there's no harm in repeating them. The absence of a properly constituted electoral commission poses a constitutional risk to our democracy. The immediate worry is that the commission will lag behind in preparing for the 2027 elections. Cumulatively, delay will slow progress in the constitutionally mandatory boundaries delimitation, preparation for the mass voter registration process, therefore a new voter register considering the delimitation, and general preparedness for the 2027 election. As such, conversation in this conference should complement any other processes in place, including the National Dialogue Committee, NADOC, and the process for recruitment of new commissioners. You should provide concrete recommendations